स्थापकाय च धर्मस्य सर्वधर्मस्वरूपिणे अवतारवरिष्ठाय रामकृष्णाय ते नमः. O Ramakrishna, the establisher of the eternal religion, the embodiment of all religions and the best of all incarnations, we salute thee. In the last class, we were reading in the page number 296, half para of para 16 we had finished. The para 16 was telling that the superior sadhakas, that is spiritual aspirants, like Sri Ramakrishna, they don't have to control their desires. Whatever desires comes into their mind is always auspicious desires. So they don't have to control, as we do, the bad desires from good in their mind. So this point is being discussed. So half para we finished. We will now start from page number 296. The Master also said that no evil desire can, by the grace of the Divine Mother, raise its head and have mastery over the mind of a man who has taken perfect refuge in her. Mother, said he, prevents him from taking a wrong step. A man who has reached such a state can perfectly trust each and every impulse of his. Then it is not only does him no harm, but becomes a source of immense good to others. For it becomes absolutely impossible for that man to seek his self-interest in that state, inasmuch as the little I, born of the identification with the body, which produces selfishness and is not contented even with the attainment of all the pleasures of the world, is merged in God forever, in the all-pervading eye of God. Therefore, the will of God, whose nature is to do good to all, then manifests itself as various desires in the mind of that man for universal welfare. Or the sadhaka in the state always feels in his heart of hearts, I am the machine, thou art the mechanic. And making sure that the desires in his own mind are the will of God, the all-pervading person, he does not at all hesitate to act according to their urge. And consequently, it is seen that others are greatly benefited by such actions of his. Such a state comes very early in the lives of uncommonly great souls like the Master. Therefore, these great souls, we read in their biographies, trust completely the desires of their own minds and very often undertake actions without having recourse to reasoning or inference at all. Keeping their little wills identified with the universal will, they can always detect and understand things beyond the minds and intellects of the ordinary people, inasmuch as these are manifest from eternity to eternity as subtle ideas in the universal mind. So the author tells us about the little I, the ego of individual souls, and the universal mind, that of God. So identification of the Jiva with the Paramatma, that is the idea. These people's ego, the self has been identified with the super self, God. So they are identified with God. Whatever they say, it's only God who says through them. That is the practical side of the saints. When we look at the saints, he looks like an ordinary person but he is the vehicle for all the thoughts of God to get expressed through human tongue. Again, coming down to the normal state of humanity, these great souls remain always dependent on the universal will and therefore are free from fear and self-interest. Hence, although during the previous state of their identification, they knew beforehand how and by whom or by what the combination of the limited bodies and minds would be destroyed, they entertained no aversion to those persons or objects. Rather, they gladly helped them to the utmost in carrying out the work. The reader will understand what we mean if we give a few examples. They know that certain things happen, but they don't want to interfere with those things happening because they are identified with God's mind. God wants certain things to happen, and they will certainly happen. Though they don't know it, they can interfere if they want, but they will not, because God is their own soul of their soul, and they love God so much. Whatever God wills to do, let Him do. They never oppose God's will. So they always take God's will as a perfect will, and they fall in line. Though they know something will happen which may not be relished by others and which could be stopped or averted by them, they would not do it. Because they know the universal Father, God, He wishes it to happen like this. So let it happen, because He knows much better than we what is good for the humanity. So they are given knowing they don't stop certain events in their life. So the author is going to give some examples. Conscious of the inevitability of Sita's banishment, that is in Ramayana, Rama sent her away to the forest. Though he knew that she was innocent, though he knew that the forsaking of Lakshmana, who was dearer than life to him, would inevitably bring his Leela as a human being to an end, he carried it out. Lakshmana was banished from his presence, and eventually Sri Ramchandra had to leave his physical body, the material body, and go away to his eternal abode. Though he knew it, he could avoid it, banishing Lakshmana from his presence. But he did not do it, because he knew it was the will of God. The universal will is working, let me be in line. So he kept quiet. Similarly, he carried out as knowing beforehand that the race of Yadu to which Krishna belonged would be destroyed, Krishna did not make the slightest attempt to prevent it. We know it from Mahabharata that the whole of Yadu Vamsha got destroyed, and Sri Krishna knew it would be destroyed, but he did not do anything to stop it. On the contrary, he acted in such a way as to bring it about at the proper time. Again, knowing it for certain that he would meet with his death at the hands of the hunter, he concealed his whole body carefully behind the leaves of a tree and kept the two reddish feet dangling in such a way that as soon as the hunter saw them, he mistook them for bird and shot them with his poisonous arrow. He then blessed and consoled the hunter. Krishna blessed the hunter who shot him with a poisonous arrow, who was repenting his mistake and gave up his body. So these are all examples where they know what is going to happen, but they don't stop because they don't want to interfere with the works of the universal mind. God the Father in heaven, what He wants to do, let Him do it. So though they know, they would not interfere. Although he already knew that he would attain parinirvana, he is Bhagavan Buddha. Bodilessness in the final beatitude if he accepted the hospitality of Chunda, or it is written here Chandala, Buddha accepted it and attended, ascended to that state. That was ascended to Nirvana. He gave up his body by accepting a sort of a poisonous mushroom preparation from this Chandala that is mentioned here. It is said elsewhere, his name was Chunda. Chunda or Chandala, whatever is the name, Buddha accepted his food, knowing it was poisonous, and gave up his body. Having protected the Chandala by his blessing and consolation from others' hatred and reproach. So he blessed him, you have done a very good thing, you relieved me from this body. So he praises the Chandala or the Chunda. Again, conscious that the religion preached by him should be polluted if he gave his approval to women's initiation into sannyasa, Buddha promised the Venerable Gautami, his mother's sister, his aunt, to be so initiated. She allowed women to enter the Buddhist monastery as nuns. So, though he knew it would halve the life of the history of the Buddhism, but he knew, even then he accepted, because that was the universal will. In spite of knowing that Judas, from the Bible is quoting this, his disciple, Christ's disciple, would betray him into the hands of the enemy, who would put an end to his life, Jesus, another incarnation of God, remained uniformly affectionate to him and engaged himself all his life in doing him good. So various examples where whatever desire comes into their mind is only for good, because they can never act against the will of God. And will of God is the most beneficial will to everybody, because He is the Father of all. He would never hurt or injure or harm anyone. We meet on investigation with many such events, even in the lives of persons perfected and liberated in life, not to speak of the incarnations of God. Even lesser persons also have followed this rule, that they don't require to be aware of what thoughts they have, because they cannot think any back thought at all. If you want to find a rational explanation of the happy synthesis between the uncommon personal effort and the absolute dependence on the universal will, which we are inevitably led to the conclusion that their personal efforts are but the manifestation of the same all-pervading will. The moment they're thinking about a particular thing itself is done by the will of God. So they think, oh, I know this one is going to happen. That also happens by the will of God. And the thing happens by the will of God. Therefore, they don't object or try to stop that incident. Therefore, it is clear that all the selfish impressions in the minds of these persons who depend absolutely on God's will are destroyed once and for all. So these great people who have identified themselves with God, that means they have become the greatest devotees of God. God loves them at most. For such people, their desires cannot be bad desires at all. All desires in them are for only good. All the bad desires are destroyed once and for all. Their minds ascend to a holy plane of consciousness where pure desires alone, absolutely untarnished by selfishness, arise in them. Their mind is the repository of only good thoughts. Bad thoughts never arise at all. So freely reposing their faith in the desires of their minds and acting under their impulse, these sadhakas in that state do not incur any blame. Whatever comes into their mind, they do. It may appear to the common people that is not good. It is blameworthy. So it is not a good act that has acted. Ordinary people may think like that. But it will never be like that. It will be only beneficial to others. Such action to the master, it goes without saying, should not be imitated by ordinary people. For the simple reason his mind is so pure, he cannot think bad thoughts at all, as selfish thoughts. So all his actions are unselfish and for the benefit of others. But we cannot be sure about our minds like that. But the sadhakas in the unique state of mentioned above will no doubt be much enlightened by them in guiding their lives. What they do, we should follow as much as we are entitled to do it. So we cannot follow them in full because we don't have that purest mind. But many good things we can take and follow them. The scriptures have compared their desires for eating, drinking, etc., which are necessary for the preservation of life, to fried seeds. Fried just as roasted seeds of trees, creepers, etc. lose their vital power and cannot germinate. So the worldly desires of those persons roasted over the fire of self-control and divine knowledge can no more draw them towards enjoyment and lead them astray. The Master also said, coming in contact with the philosopher's stone, a steel sword becomes a golden sword. It remains unchanged in its form, but it cannot inflict injury like any other sword. It may appear like a sword, but this golden sword cannot inflict any injury as the ordinary sword. So these great incarnations are like golden swords. Even if they want to injure, they cannot injure. They would not like go to injure at all. But even if they want to, they have no means to injure others. They are helpless to do good. As one of our Swamis used to say, so if somebody asked about a brahmachari of the ashrama, some foreigners used to come, what is this young man staying here? He is a brahmachari. Then the foreigner would not understand what does the brahmachari. Then in half jokingly, our Swami used to say, so he is a chronic celibate. So celibacy has become a chronic with it. Just like that, in this case of incarnation, goodness has become chronic with them. They cannot get out of that. Goodness has become their very nature. The seers of the Upanishads say that all the mental processes of the sadhakas in that time or in that state corresponds to acts, facts. In other words, all the ideas arising naturally in their minds always prove to be objectively true and never otherwise. This is a great thing we have to notice. You see, many desires arise in our mind. It does not mean that all those are true. So we may think that the world is free from corona. So we may very strongly imagine also that the world is free from corona. Then will the world be free from corona? Whereas if a great man like Sri Ramakrishna thinks the world is without any corona, it is free from it, the moment he thinks all corona will disappear. One thought is enough, because they are one with the universal mind, and this whole universe is said to be an idea in the universal mind. That is, God thinks that these worlds be like this, the worlds are like that. We are all part and parcel of that God's idea. So God is having a big idea. So in that idea we got hundreds and hundreds of persons like us. All of us are made to do, made to lie down, made to work, made to run about. all by the will of God only. What I am doing also is by the will of God. That you are hearing is also by the will of God. So this is the fact. So when that God thinks, let there be no creation at all. The whole his mind is freed from the idea. When he puts aside the idea, the whole creation goes to nothing. So anything that comes into their mind corresponds to the real life. What we call as real is part and parcel of the idea in the mind of God. So we could never have believed the above mentioned words of the seers if we did not repeatedly tested the ideas of the Master established in Bhavamukha. That is the state Bhavamukha, with a high state of spiritual life, where he is on the threshold of Samadhi on one side and the highest truths of this real world. So he is having information from the world also. He is having information from the highest spiritual sphere also. So when he stands on the threshold, he is supposed to be a Bhavamukha Paramahamsa. So he is at the Bhavamukha, the place where both the transcendent and the real life, they meet. The phenomena as well as the transcendent world, they meet there. It is a common point where these great people stand. They know everything about spiritual life. They know at the same time the manifested world also, where only materialism is there. Materials are there. They know both materialism and spiritualism simultaneously. So we could never have believed this until we had seen. He was in Bhavamukha, and all the ideas at that time were found to be true. If we felt hesitation about taking any food, it was, we have seen, found on inquiry to have been polluted before. Sri Ramakrishna would refuse to take food when someone serves or in some vessel it is served. If you investigate, you will find there was something wrong with the vessel or something was wrong with the man who served. So his mind could detect, with which all ordinary people cannot detect, that there is pollution there. So if he felt his power of speech failing him suddenly when he was about to say anything spiritual to anybody, it was proved that the said person was in truth completely unfit for it. You see, how he probes into the mind of that man without his telling him anything, without him questioning in any way. He sees a man, he stops talking to him about his spirituality. How does he know that he is unfit, that it should not be told to him? If it is told, perhaps he will use it for some bad purpose, to achieve something bad. All the things he could know by sort of a superior mind than our ordinary mind. If he felt that a certain person would not realize religious truths or would realize but a few in his life, it actually came to happen so. So some people used to say, as soon as they would come, like others, they would also want initiation or advice from him how to progress in spiritual life. He said, no, you have to wait for some more time. You come after a year or two. When he would say, later on it would be found out that he was unfit at that time to receive any spiritual instruction, because he was involved in so many worldly things, full of selfishness, greed, lust. So how can he at all practice any spirituality in that state? It was later on found out he was a man of that, but nobody told Sri Ramakrishna. But his mind could know it. So it is an extraordinary mind. If any particular mood or a particular form of a deity appeared in his mind, when he saw a certain person, it was known that the said person was a sadhaka of that mood or that deity. Sri Ramakrishna used to say, when Vaishnavas used to come, before they came, I could get the vision of Vishnu or any incarnation of Vishnu. So after some time, these Vishnu followers would come. You see, this was the extraordinary mind of the incarnation. If he suddenly said anything to any person under the influence of an inward mood, that person got much light by it and his life became altogether changed. Innumerable incidents of this type can be cited. That their ideas, they correspond to the reality of this real world. So their ideas are not just like that. Ideas come and go in their mind and nothing happens either to themselves or to others. It does not go like that. Whatever they think will become true. So if they think that we should progress, we should progress. Progress must come in our life. So if they bless so and so, you will be a saint. He may be the worst sinner. He shall become a saint. He will become a saint. Therefore, their ideas, they correspond to the realities of this world. This has been seen again and again in the life of Sri Ramakrishna, the great incarnation of the age. The master was initiated in the Vatsalya mood. Urged by that irresistible inward devotional mood, the master, as he used to do on many other occasions, now regarded himself as a woman, both in body and mind, and acted accordingly. So he assumed the woman's attitude to worship and realize the Bala Gopala. Bala Gopala are the child Ramchandra. So when he had the vision of Rama as a sweet child, he assumed the attitude of maternal affection towards him. He had been, no doubt, initiated in the mantra of Rama long, long ago in order to perform properly the worship and service of his firm family deity Raghuvir. Raghuvir is Ramchandra, so their family deity was Raghuvir. So to worship that Raghuvir, he had been initiated earlier. But long ago he had to perform the worship in his family. But he was then not attracted towards him in any mood except that of a servant towards his master. At that time his Baba was the servant's attitude towards the master, Dasya Baba. So he had assumed the Dasya Baba when he was worshipping in his family, the Raghuvira. Having the above mentioned new mood towards the deity, the Jatadhari who came to him, so who will come to him, he is teaching the Vatsalya Baba, not the Dasya Baba. Therefore he had to get initiated into that again. He now became anxious to be initiated by a guru according to the scriptures in a mantra. Befitting the new mood and to reach the ultimate limit realization in that discipline. Perfected in the mantra of the divine child, Jatadhari came to know the eagerness of the master and gladly initiated him in the mantra of his own chosen ideal, that is Bala Ramchandra, the boy Ramchandra. So he was initiated into the worship of the young Ramchandra, boy Ramchandra, through a special mantra. Jatadhari came to know, and when he came to know, he initiated him. Then merged in the sadhana of that mantra, in the manner taught by Jatadhari, the master succeeded in the course of only a few days in having the divine vision of the child constantly. Not only once, they constantly used to see Ramchandra around him. So he had the presence of Ramchandra around him. After a few days of sadhana, so deep was his sadhana, so So he could feel the constant presence of Ramchandra around him. Absorbed in the meditation of the divine form, in a mood of maternal affection towards him, he soon came to realize that Rama, who is the son of Dasharatha, is in every being. The same Rama is immanent in the universe and yet transcends it. So this truth he came to know after realizing the truth of Bala Ramchandra, boy Ramchandra. That is to say, Rama is not only the Dasharatha's son, but also exists as a Jiva in each body. Again, entering the universe and eternally manifesting himself as it, he is ever existent in his own attributeless nature, devoid of Maya and beyond everything in the universe. So he feels that Rama is there as a boy Ramchandra, and as the creator of this whole universe, he is there in every atom of it. So he is beyond Maya, beyond the in which the whole universe is there. The universe is a manifestation of Maya, but this Ramchandra is beyond Maya. His power is his, but he is not the powers. Maya is his power, he is the Lord, and Maya is his servant. Maya serves as his servant, whereas he is the master. He is beyond Maya. He is ever existent in its attributeless nature. That's what it means. He is beyond the Maya. We heard the master reciting on many occasions the Hindi couplet given above. Jatadhari made a gift of the image of Ramlala. So besides initiating the master in the mantra, Jatadhari, before he went away, made a gift of it to the master, and which he had served so long with single-minded devotion. So when he found that Sri Ramakrishna loves Ramchandra so much, and Ramchandra also loves him so much, then Jatadhari decided he will leave the image with Sri Ramakrishna himself. For that living image, he expressed his desire to Jatadhari that he would henceforward live with the master. Ramchandra told Jatadhari, now you can go, I will be with Paramahamsa Sri Ramakrishna. Then what would he do later? We have described elsewhere in detail the extraordinary Leela of that image with the master and Jatadhari. Therefore, it is unnecessary to deal with the topic again. So we are going to read about when the sadhana in Vatsalya Bhava in detail, when we read to what extent the Bhairavi Brahmani helped the master. When the master applied his mind in the aforesaid manner to perfecting his Vatsalya devotion and experience its ultimate result, the Bhairavi Brahmani was staying at Dakshineshwar. We were told by the master himself that she was as highly experienced in the disciplines of the Panchabhavas spoken of in the Vaishnava books as she was in those of the Tantras. Did the master receive any particular help from her while practicing the Vatsalya and Madhura Bhavas? We have not clearly heard anything about it from him, but we were told by the master himself and Hriday that established in the mood of maternal affection towards God, the Brahmani treated the master as Gopala, the child Krishna. So Brahmani did not, whether she helped him in attaining to the Vatsalya Bhava towards Ramchandra, though he says he does not know anything about it, but he says that Brahmani had a Vatsalya Bhava towards Sri Ramakrishna. She considers Sri Ramakrishna as a child. Brahmani treated the master as Gopala, the child Krishna. Therefore, it is inferred that the master got at least some help from her, both at the time when he assumed the mood of maternal affection toward the child Krishna and at the ultimate experience in that mood, and when he practiced Madhura Bhava, the sweet mood, himself adopting the attitude of a woman towards a lover. One might doubt whether he actually got any particular help from her, but this much is admitted without doubt that a strong desire to practice the disciplines of those moods arose in his mind when he saw the Brahmani engaged in them and heard her eulogizing them. So the Brahmani was practicing the Madhura Bhava, which Sri Ramakrishna is going to practice. So that was, he got the enthusiasm to start practicing Madhura Bhava by looking at, by Brahmani practicing already the Madhura Bhava. Though what help she gave to him is yet not known, but he got that enthusiasm to start a new sadhana of Madhura Bhava by looking at Brahmani following those rituals in the Madhura Bhava. Now we come to chapter 13, the essence of the Madhura Bhava, the sweet mood. The hard inward struggle of the aspirant and his goal. It is difficult for one who is not a sadhaka to understand the biographies of sadhakas. For sadhana is a thing of the subtle realm of spirituality that we are already finding. This book, the master, the Ramakrishna, the great master, which we are studying, this is requires a lot of concentration to get at the meaning of the author, because the subject is rather a little serious subject. So he says, similarly the other practice of other spiritual moods is also more difficult than the present one. So he is preparing your mind to become more concentrated and more attentive for the subject that is going to discuss now. The subject of Madhura Bhava, or the sweet mood, the mood of the lover. There the gross deluding forms of sight for sadhana. There, that means in the usual world, there the gross deluding forms of sight, taste and other sense objects are not experienced. In the spiritual world, which is going to discuss, so there is no sight or taste or anything. The five enjoyments of the sense which we see in this world, they are not to be found there, the spiritual world. There, the marvelous coexistence or succession of events around what appear to be external things and persons is not seen. Nothing like this gross world where so many things, so many persons are seen. Inside the spiritual, then what else is seen? These are not seen. These are the slightest manifestation of the frantic efforts which a man makes for the sole purpose of enjoying the monopoly of pleasures, for elbowing out of all others, competition, which the ordinary people, deluded by the sense objects, extol as heroism and greatness, but which in reality are but products of human mind rendered restless under the impulse of the pairs of opposites such as attachment and aversion, fame and infamy, etc. So what we call as struggles and signs of heroism, fight, so they do not exist in the spiritual world. Inside the spiritual world, we fight against our own lower nature and try to ascend to the higher nature. So it is an inner fight, inner struggle. So it is quite different from the struggles of this external world. But what exists there are only the aspirant's mind and the infinite currents of impressions of its past lives. So the inner fight means our lower nature, our attachment to the sense enjoyments and our lack of detachment, lack of vairagya, lack of spirit of renunciation. That is what matters. So again and again, inside the mind, there is a struggle to renounce everything that is transient, that is not permanent, and get attached to the really permanent thing that is God. So this fight goes on inside the mind always of the sadhakas. The mind wants to go back to the world and enjoy the already, but to which he is acquainted, the five sense objects. But the higher mind says, no, these five sense objects and their enjoyment will not give you really lasting enjoyment. So we don't want it, we want to give it up. So one advises renunciation, one advises running behind these sense objects, tremendous attachment. So we fight against our attachments through spirit of renunciation. That is what happens inside the mind of a sadhaka. In that realm, there exists the attraction towards ideals, leading the aspirant on to the ultimate goal. Attraction produced by his constantly coming in conflict with certain external things and persons. There exists his endless, unflinching struggle against his adverse impressions in order to make the mind fix itself exclusively on those ideals leading on to that goal. So he wants to be an idealistic person. But the mind says, no idealism. Let us be true to the real world. This is all that is available in this world. Let us be satisfied with it. But the real sadhaka says, no, there can be something higher. So we should struggle for it. I don't want to simply live a ordinary mundane life and enjoy only these five sensual joys. I want to have the higher joy of the spirit. So there is a struggle going on like that. There exists a resolute attempt at continually diving deeper into one's own personality by turning the mind away from all external objects and withdrawing it within. So the struggle is the mind wants to go out with the senses to enjoy, but the higher mind says, no, by allowing the mind to go outside, there will be no mind at all to think about the inside. Inside means about God, about our own soul. So the inner truths of the subtler world you cannot know unless you turn your mind, and the mind is only one. If you allow it to go outside, you will not have to have that mind to think anything about your inside. So if we have to go inside, you have to give up the outside. What? To giving up the outside world and its attraction. To go inside and then enjoy the eternal, infinite joy of Atman is called renunciation. Renunciation is not a negative thing. To enjoy a higher thing inside ourselves, we give up the tinsels of the outside world. It is something like giving 1 rupee, purchasing a ticket in a lottery and inheriting 10 crores of rupees. You give 1 rupee and then you get 10 crores. Then will you not give up that 1 rupee? Ordinarily you ask anybody to give 1 rupee, they will not give you. But you say, no, you give 1 rupee, you will take a ticket and you may get 10 crores in the lottery. Immediate. Why 1? You take 10, give it 10 tickets. So we renounce the lower thing by the attraction of the higher thing. And renunciation is the means by which we do it. So he says, this struggle goes on. Whenever we say to the mind, no, 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 this is a lower pleasure, don't give it up. You will get a higher pleasure in God. Mind does not accept. No, 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 where is God? Where is godly pleasures, divine pleasures? We don't know anything about it. So we have this world, let us enjoy this. So mind would not leave the world. We would not leave to go to the world. We want the mind to go to the heavens or to the divine beings who would bless us with eternal joy, lasting joy. So the subject continues in our next reading also. We shall close it here for the day. Niranjanam nityamanantarupam bhaktanukampadhrita vigraham vai yeshavataram parameshamidhyam tam Ramakrishnam shirasa namamaha. O Ramakrishna, the taintless one, the eternal one, the one with infinite forms, the one who has assumed a form out of compassion to the devotees, the incarnate Supreme Soul, and the adorable Lord of all, we salute you, bowing our heads.